Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the internationally coordinated and internationally scripted, all across the Western world, story about why residential home prices, house prices are so high. Is it because of mass migration? Is it because of international finance like the BlackRocks and buying up swathes of real estate? Is it because international students from rich, wealthy, Communist Party general or Brahmin families are permitted to buy real estate in Western countries, and they're used as sort of proxy buyers for all the folks back home? So here's a student with works maybe a part-time job at a 7-Eleven, but somehow they own 15 properties. These sorts of things. Is that the cause of offshore buying? Is that the cause of high home prices? No, it's none of those things. No, they got no effect at all. It's a supply issue. And you know who the real culprits are? The real problem is all those old white retirees. The old white retirees sitting on properties, where they've 3 or 4 bedrooms, and they're refusing to downsize. Those fucking damn Nazis, damn fucking Nazis, Hitler's, every one of them. They're refusing to downsize. They're opposing the use. The evilness of it is just unspeakable. And so it's them that's the cause. But now on top of that, and we're coming back to the old white folks again, those damn fucking white fucking Nazis. They're putting out their maybe they got a little self-contained, 1-bedroom place in their backyard. In Australia we call them granny flats, but maybe they got one of those. But they're, instead of putting it out to rent, they're doing it on Airbnb, and that's the cause. And the combination of these old white folks doing doing the Airbnb thing and refusing point blank, the Nazis, not downsizing. That's what the cause of it is. But wait, stop, says the reasonable person. What about all this mass migration? Gazillions of people coming in, legal, masses of people coming, gazillions of students who've got who are buying vast numbers of properties each. Aren't they a cause? I mean, surely they... No. And if you say that, and if you even ask that question, then you're a fucking damn Nazi. What a fucking fascist thing to ask. So that's really the... Now, I noticed these talking points doing the rounds in Australia, and it doesn't take much, because there's a certain structure to this. When there is just so many lies and so much spin and insane sort of attempts at justification and use of assertions to make the talking point, sort of to give it the legs, that you say, that's a globalist talking point. You kind of get to spot it after a while. So I knew as soon as I saw it for the first time in Australia, reported by one of the most reliable pro-globalist outfits in Australia, media outfits, that I knew if I went to the Canadian broadcasting company, the BBC in Britain, or the American broadcasting company in the United States, I knew I would see exactly the same thing. I really didn't have to think about it. Sure enough, the old people white people in Australia are to blame, the old white people in Canada are to blame, white people, and so on, all around the world. And this occurs all at the same time. And these stories appeared at the same time. And if you then go back through the World Economic Forum and their announcements and press releases and so on, and the United Nations, then you could see that's where it started, and it just distributed out, fanned out within a couple of days. It was all over the world. So it's a pre-planned, pre-scripted thing. Now, give these globalists some credit. They've certainly said, not that they do it well necessarily, but their determination to tell lies and their ability to have it distributed worldwide through all the key media organizations. This is awesome. I mean, this takes a massive corruption to achieve this. But it's an indication of just how much our system has been corrupted by these people. They have the ability to tell the most outrageous lies and not be questioned. Not even, no, there's no pushback or hardly any pushback or questioning, and they're just able to distribute this message and assert it as fact and pretty much get away with it. And people that actually, if you want to have a look at it, you can see or examine it in even anything more than cursory detail. You can see that it's all a load of nonsense, but they've got this ability to craft a narrative and put it out there right across the world. And to do that without any pushback. Now let's have a look at this. I always figured that the Western governments would start coming for retirees who've got a house that there's the husband and wife, or maybe one of them's died, but they've lived in that house. Their children were sort of born there. They've lived in the house for a long time. They're still able to live independently, maybe with a bit of home help in the case of people where their health is starting to fail, but they're not ready to go to a nursing home and drool and so on until it's all over. But I always figured the government would start coming for these people, and I think it'll be one of a few ways. They'll say, okay, well, you're living in a, for example, you're either a couple or again, only one of the parties is remaining, and you're living in a 4-bedroom house. Now that may be, maybe say an elderly woman. She's in her 80s. She's lived there forever. She's very familiar with it. All her friends live around, or people that she knows. It's the neighbourhood. All she has now is that neighbourhood, because the children visiting, or her friends coming around, that sort of thing. And she's probably not very mobile at this point, so it's harder for her to go out and go visiting friends sort of far away or something like that. But that's all she's got. That's now her whole life. It's all she knows and it's all she has. So when someone comes along and says, well, wait, you should sell that because the globalist ideological fanatics want you to, and if you don't, we're going to call you a Nazi. That's probably not a very good incentive. But I think that's where it's heading. So, well, you don't need those 4 bedrooms. And because we're doing the mass migration, we can use those 4 bedrooms, or this 4-bedroom house. We can use these 4 bedrooms more usefully than you can. Those 4 bedrooms aren't doing anything. Maybe you're storing stuff in it or whatever, but you don't really need them. We say you don't really need them, which is very, very Soviet, really, in terms of forced social organization. But this is how the Soviets sort of did this. They every room in a building was effectively room for a family, and this sort of thing. This is when the Bolsheviks took over in the Soviet Union in 1917. They did this sort of stuff, and we're looking, really, it's their playbook really that we're looking at here. So the way it works is that they're already starting. So you don't need that house. So you're going to have African migrants or third world migrants have come in, and we're going to say you have to rent those bedrooms to those third world migrants, and if you don't, we will withdraw your pension. You won't have a pension, or we won't allow you to use the state-funded healthcare, which for old people is very, very important, as you can imagine. So we're going to take either or both of those things away if you don't do what we tell you to do and rent those bedrooms out at a fixed price to these third world peasants. Or we're going to, you can keep the house if you want. No one's stopping. It's a free country. The government's going to say. What we'll do is we'll have a special land tax for an excess bedroom land tax. So we'll tax you, X dollars a year, but that's going to be 3 times the amount of my pension. Well, look, it's up to you. We're not telling you to do it. It's your choice. You've got free choice. You can either be bankrupted or sell out as we want you to, but it's your choice. You get to decide. So it's really no choice at all, of course. So I think that's really where it's going. Now, will that solve the problem of the effects of mass migration. Because the government, or the globalist controlled governments, there's no real Western governments anymore. The globalist controlled puppet governments are Australia is, as much as anywhere else, are bringing in masses of third world immigrants and who aren't skilled and they're not needed, and they're just flooding the place with non-white people. That seems to be their only intention. Certainly from what I can tell, if these people that were being brought in were all highly skilled, well, fine, but they're not. They're illiterate peasants. So bringing these people in, and which creates, as you can imagine, a huge demand for housing. Now, it's not as a big a demand as you might think, because a lot of not all, but a lot of these people will live, 10 people to a one-bedroom apartment, which is about how it is, in the places like India and Pakistan where they come from. And they've got the added benefit here in the first world country where they get electric lights and running water and flushing toilets and all that sort of thing, paved roads to the nearest supermarket. So they get a lot of benefits. They still live 10 to room as they did, in Pakistan or wherever, but they've now got all these other things. So to them, it's still not too bad a deal. So because they're prepared to live that many to a one-bedroom apartment or a single dwelling, then the effect is not, because 500,000 people arrive in Australia last year, that doesn't mean 500,000 houses are needed or 200,000 houses. Because again, they'll tend to live, not all of them, but many of them will tend to live multiple people to a small bedroom. Even you look at Indian families or families from the subcontinent, the white, Sri Lanka included, where they're prepared to live 3 or 4 generations of people in one house, which makes it, as an economic unit, rather effective. By the way, the grandparents look after the children, and all the adults or the people of adult age can go and work or study, as the case may be. So in terms of economic efficiency, that's a pretty decent sort of unit. And given there are so many incomes being brought into the household, they can service bigger mortgages and so on. Then you get the mass migration obviously is a huge pressure on and I can account for this. There are, in the inner city areas, when we're driving around, we see apartments for rent, and there's a sign up, apartment for rent, and this is like the inspection day or some, that sort of thing. And in the inner city ones, you see this long queue. I mean, there can be 50, 60, 70 people in the fucking queue. And there's very few white people in there. Hardly any white people are in that queue. They're nearly all brown and black people in the queue. And your whole clans sort of turn up as well. So it's like 20 people can come to view to do the inspection. That's because how many people are going to live in this 2-bedroom apartment. So you can get long queues, even into the hundreds. It's quite remarkable. I never used to see this sort of thing. When I first started looking at apartments to rent, like I'm just a young guy fresh out of college, that sort of thing, looking at apartments to rent, then I'd be there was no inspection times, because there was no point in having an inspection time, because not enough people would turn up. Nobody would turn up. So it was by a point where you just rock in or call up the real estate, and they'll say, well, we'll meet you there. And I remember, you're the only person that we've seen this week or this fortnight that's viewed the apartment. And so I would, they would offer to cut deals with you because they were so keen. The landlords were always really motivated to rent the place. So the rent could be advertised at, I'll use round numbers here. It could be advertised $100 a week. But look, if you're prepared to sign up today, we'll give it to you for $85. These sorts of things were very common. I can't remember a time when they didn't offer to cut a deal with me on the rent. And and I remember I got an apartment that was one time I got an apartment that was like 1 street back from the beach. It didn't, if you hung your head out of the bathroom window, you could kind of get some water views, but it's close to the beach and not too far away from shops. And so you kind of walked to wherever you needed to get to. And it was furnished, 2-bedroom, I think it was $35 a week. This is not that long ago. So it gives you an idea. Gives you an idea how much things have changed. But what are the drivers for the increase in real estate? Well, there's a few, whether it be rent or mortgage for that matter. Now, and again, just to illustrate, I bought a house in 1990 for $200,000. I was still in my 20s, and that house today is worth like 2.2 million. Now wages have only gone up by, I think, 6 times over that same period. So again, you're looking at real estate is increasing. Cost of real estate, which includes rent, is increasing at 3 times the rate of wages. 3 times the rate of wages. So even if you've got a dual income, two people, and you've got no kids, you're still costing you in household income terms. It's still costing you 1/3 more than it did, even 30 years ago. So that just shows the level of inflation on both rents and mortgages and of course house prices. Now, what are the drivers of this? Well, mass migration is one. 2 is the banks in connivance with the government started lowering the price or lowering the amount of deposit you needed to be able to buy a house. So I remember buying a block of land. I bought a block of land in the late 1980s, somewhere around there, and I had to have a 40% deposit for land, and it wasn't so much. I think it was 25 or 30% for a house. I think it was 25% for a house. Anyway, they dropped the requirement to something like 5% for a house. So house and land together, ready to rock, was, I think they reduced it to 5%. So that meant a lot more people could now enter the housing game, and lower income people could do it, because lower income people have more of a struggle to get a deposit together. So they came in. Then you got the mass migration. That if you go around to the housing auctions anywhere around Sydney, anywhere, particularly in the areas dominated by and there are entire suburbs now where you won't see a white face in. So if you look at the auctions or the housing auctions, that sort of thing, again, there's no white people at the housing auctions. If you go into some of the more upmarket suburbs where you start to see a smaller number of brown and black people, then you see the rich Brahmins and the nominees for the Black Rocks and the big finance companies and the Brahmins, Communist Party generals. You see that, so they're then bidding there, and they go from one place to the next, just buying up, just vacuuming up everything in sight in terms of real estate. Now, the other thing, and of course, you don't need that many in a suburb. As I've mentioned many times in other videos, there are suburbs where just one offshore Chinese investor owns more than 200 freestanding properties, for fuck's sake. And this is not one-off, the occasional thing here and there. This is all over the big cities like Sydney and Melbourne in Australia. So they own vast amounts of real estate, which they've acquired through, in my view at least, underhanded means, exploiting loopholes, I guess, in the offshore buyer type system. They use local nominees and that type of thing. The other thing is the government opened up in Australia, and this is elsewhere in the Western world. The government, and again, there was a lot of connivance. That a lot of the Western governments did this all at the same time. So again, globalist coordinated, where the student coming in to study anything really could get a kind of a temporary visa to be a student, which then allowed them to buy property. Why you would want or allow students to buy property is beyond me. They're only going to stay there for 3 years or so for the time of the supposed course. So this opened up a mass scam industry where people could come in as students to study dishwashing or to study, floor sweeping or bum wiping or something like that. They could come in. So, well, I'm a student, I'm studying something. and they would just be nominees, flunky stooge nominees for the money boys back home. So this became a massive money laundering industry. So you find a kid with no money was had a property portfolio of 10, 15, 20 properties. So it was outrageously exploited by these offshore buyers. But again, they're buying up property that the locals can't buy. And given they don't have to earn their money at a 9-to-5 job, they're just corrupt monopolists laundering their money. They can operate by different rules. And you see this when you go to the auctions. You see the family guy with the white family with the mum, dad, and maybe 1 or 2 kids, and they've got their tight budgets. They've got their income. They have to live by the discipline of their income, and they come in all hopeful and wide-eyed, and they're competing with these offshore gazillionaire monopolists, corrupt monopolists. They've got no hope. No hope. They can't compete in that sort of. So the residential real estate should be for the local people that live in that country. That's all it should be for. It shouldn't be for offshore exploiters, which is exactly what it is now. So more and more of the real estate is being bought up under these conditions, which is creating artificial shortages. Now, the rents that these people put property up for rent, but they want rents that no person can afford. But then they put their own relatives and buddies and flunkies in there for no rent, because they're the ones, they use. The big property owners also run labour hire scams where they bring in people to work in, wash dishes in the restaurant or sweep the floors here or whatever. And they package up their income with accommodation so that they don't pay tax, and it's a round robin of scams and offsets, so that no one's actually paying any tax, and it's all outrageously corrupt. But there you go. That's what. So those are the causes of the real estate. It's not simply an increasing demand due to migration and so on, which it does play a big role, but it's also offshore buying and the money laundering factor of this offshore buying, and allowing people who have no income to buy vast swathes of property. And it's so blatant and brazen. The government could stop it in an instant if they wanted to, but it's like illegal migration to Britain. They don't want to stop it. The globalists have instructed them and ordered them to do this, and so they're doing it. They're not the government of the people anymore. They're just little flunky stooges for the globalists. So they're allowing these scams to continue, but they can stop the offshore buying. I say some people. We were renting an apartment near the downtown or something a few years ago now, but we needed to be close to one of the bigger projects we're working on, and so we wanted to be nearby, because we were going to be starting early and working late. And we noticed there was a guy, an illiterate Chinese guy, who was a part-time cleaner. His wife didn't work, and she had like a few kids, and so she was in, and they were in this apartment, and he had this multi-gazillion dollar real estate portfolio. Now, clearly he hasn't got the income to do it. Clearly he's a nominee for offshore financial interests. And every now and again, a very important looking Chinese guy would come around that looked like he could summon up a bunch of assassins, sort of with a snap of his fingers. He just had that look about him. And this guy would effectively, fall on the floor and kowtow and grovel and writhe in submissive sort of. And so clearly, this was the big boss coming around. But he had this property portfolio, and I went to look at an auction one day, and it wasn't far off, and it was a property that was well over $1 million. And then this is going back some years, and sure enough, this guy's there. Now I speak Chinese, so I can hear what's going on as he's talking to one of his buddies. I'm standing behind him. He hasn't seen me at this point. And so I'm listening to what's going on. They're talking about, and the guy with the money is obviously telling, no, bid again, no, keep on going. But money's not an issue. Don't even think about the money. Keep on bidding until you get it. And that was what he was being told. And so again, he's a nominee. It's in his name, but wouldn't somebody sort of say, well, hold on a minute, you've got a job as a part-time cleaner and you're making, your weekly, I'll use round numbers again, your weekly income is $100, but somehow you're managing to meet $10,000 a month payments on these properties, or $20,000. How are you able to do this? Let's have a look at this. Let's chin. Let's sit down and talk about this. And you could expose it instantly and easily, and for all the for all the people, the immigration agents, the taxation, all this sort of the people. It would be easy to pick this up and jump all over it, but they don't. And again, as I've pointed out a number of times, for real estate, for politicians now all across the Western world, more than half of their income comes from real estate speculation, cozy deals that are organised by the banks and the big finance people, being introduced to super cashed up, corrupt buyers from China or wherever. This is so they these politicians can buy a house for $100, sell it a year later for 10 times that amount, to be introduced again by the banking cartel to some rich offshore buyer, and the politician makes a fuckload of money and they're happy. So this real estate thing has become like a creature that feeds off itself, but really delivers the benefits to a very small number of people. Now coming back to the issue of this has artificially jacked up the price of real estate, residential real estate, by again it's increasing in price at three fucking times the rate that wages are increasing. So it just goes to show how our standard of living in the West has fallen off a cliff. Now, the effect of this on the youth of, or anyone, really looking at the price of real estate, or looking at the possibility of the life they're going to lead, the amount of people that can afford to live a lifestyle of buying a house and having a family, the amount of people that could do that in 1968 was 75% of the workforce could afford it. Today, it's not even 2 or 3% can afford to live in. I mean, you can live in the shittiest areas still, and live in small shitty apartments, and that's, you can still do that. But if you want a freestanding house in the tree-lined street type thing, very few people can afford it. Let's even be generous and say 5 out of every 100 workers can afford that, which is very generous. Say 5 out of 100 workers. And that's a drop from 75 out of 100 workers could afford that from again the 1960s. So the rate of shrinkage here is huge. And so when you're a government controlled by the globalists, and this is probably a centrally determined policy, well, it is, because it's happening all across the Western world simultaneously. You're looking at, okay, how can we want to continue with the mass migration. We don't want to stop that. We don't want to make houses more affordable necessarily. That's not. We want to still have the big banks and the big financial cartels making creaming it off the top as they are. So we still want to keep all those destructive things in place. So we now have to pass the cost of this outrageous imposition. We want to pass this cost on. We want to move the problem around. We don't want to solve the problem. We just want to move the effects of it around. So already they've done that by jacking up the price of real estate and energy and so on. But real estate, they've forced the cost of this transition to a globalized world. They've forced the cost onto the Western citizens that hitherto could afford this. Any young kid, certainly from my generation, any young kid, coming out of college and so on, could look forward. If you were hardworking, you were bright, you were prepared to go the extra yard, you could do really well for yourself. That's not the case anymore. A very small number now can do well for themselves, and they're probably going to have to be convinced that they're going to have to sign on to the globalist project big time if they want to get any of the well-paying jobs based on hard work and ingenuity and commitment and all these sorts of things. Those jobs aren't paying well anymore. You want to be a diversity, equity, inclusion director, then that's going to pay 3, 4, even 5 times what an engineer will get paid now. The engineer building the bridge will be paid shit money compared to the diversity officer. That's how things are reversed there as well. So when you look at as a kid looks into a younger person, or anyone at all really, you can be under the age of 35. You look in the future, and your chance of owning a house is close to zip. 1 in 20, 1 in 25 people are going to be able to afford that. This is assuming this is without inheritance or without winning a lottery with it. But so inheritance aside, you've got no chance. And if your parents live to a ripe old age, you could be 60 before you ever own your own house. And that's again going to be through inheritance. So when you're a kid looking into the future, you've got no chance at all. Your future is bleak indeed. You will never own a house. You can afford to get married, but given the marriage contract has no value or weight anymore, that's going to be a high risk. You wouldn't want to marry someone who makes, if you're a guy, you certainly wouldn't want to marry someone who makes a lower income than you do. So you won't be able to afford children, or if you do, you're going to live hand to mouth for the rest of your life. So this idea in 1970 of the single, the guy working in the factory with a dependent wife and 2.4 children, that's about as far away. I mean, that could be in another solar system. It's so far away now. But could it be correct? Could it be corrected? Well, it could, but the answer the globalists are saying, well, look, if all those old white people, it's all notice how it's always the white people's fault. Those fucking white Nazis. If all those old white people are just downsized to 1-bedroom apartments, then we'd have all these houses, these 3, 4, 5-bedroom, whatever houses would suddenly become available. And there's a million houses in Australia that could be made available if only those damn fucking white Nazis. It's always their fault, the white Nazis. If those white Nazis could just sell off their downsized self, the problem solved. Well, we could stop the Airbnb thing because these white people are doing that. That's an absolute furphy, that Airbnb. What a load of fucking bullshit. Most of it, not all, but most of the Airbnbs are just renting out a room in the house. That's all it is. And they could give those to a student or something, but that it's not like it's a separate freestanding premises with any privacy or your own bathroom or anything like that. Most of them are just rooms they're renting. So really this will be a temporary sort of, it's not a solution. Let's suppose they got every old person, senior citizen, retiree to sell off the house and downsize to some bullshit 1-bedroom apartment. Let's suppose they did that. It would solve the problem, or not solve, it would give an artificial sort of offsetting to the issue of housing shortage, but only if they were to stop mass migration at the same time, because the following year there'd be another gazillion people again that have to be housed and put somewhere, the mass migration. So nothing would be solved. It would disenfranchise white people, which one wonders is the real purpose of it, but it wouldn't solve anything. But I just want to talk about the globalist propaganda there around this, again, that they really want to come for those white people. In divorce, it's that man, it's the guy. We got to control the guy. If we control the man, we can control the situation. Or if it's in, mass migration coming in, we have to control the white people. It's the white people it's the white people are the problem. And not the illiterate peasants that run around with machetes. It's not them, it's those damn white Nazis. Now with the housing thing, it's the old white people. If we can control the old white people, we can solve that sort of thing. And that's always the case. It's always the white people who have to shoulder the burden of this. You've been a Tacitus today, your Pushback Channel. Thank you for listening.